The change of immigration law in 1987 allowed, for the first time ever, non-British subject, non-British people from non-traditional countries to come into New Zealand in sizable numbers, and many of the many Chinese came into New Zealand in the early 1990s, and the so-called Asian influx was changed the look of Auckland forever, I think. And mainly because the number of is sizable, but also more than 75% of the newcomers chose to settle in Auckland. It is just like the number of Pacific people chose to settle in Auckland. Why? As to why the Chinese, or why the new Chinese, I should say, or why the new Koreans chose to live in Auckland, was that the immigration law of New Zealand asks for people who are well educated, people who are technocrats, people who are professionals, and who are business people to come. They, would have the right to apply to come to New Zealand, could qualify. And if they qualify, then they would come to New Zealand. They naturally congregate in Auckland, because that is where they came from. They came from the mega cities of Asia, so we can't exactly expect them to go to Invercargill. So, well, with all due respect to Invercargill. One thing that should be mentioned is that many of the Chinese small businesses are set up by the professionals who could not find employment that are consummate to their degrees, because quite often the Chinese degrees are not recognized here, or the professional, like the engineers or the accountants and the doctors in particular, veterinary surgeons cannot be registered in New Zealand because their degrees are not, the boards don't recognize them. Yeah, so the Chinese will start their own shops and so on. So this is really very common among migrants or new immigrants. It is to become self-employed rather than to be unemployed, and that is why we find so many shops who are run by Asians or run by Chinese even along Queen Street, or even around Khyber Pass, and so many Chinese eateries, because they don't require a big high capital outlay, and they can be run by the family.